Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Angular. This week on our panel, we have John Papa.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, night.
Alyssa Nichol.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Joe Eames. I think he's hiding from us, or he hasn't found his mute button. I'm Charles.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, there you go.
There was the mute button.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv, and this week we have a special guest, and that's Chaz. Oh, Gatian. I should have asked how to say your last name.
Yep, it's Gatian.
Gatian. This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give you full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io. All right, Chaz, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Chaz Gatian. I'm a dev architect pushing our modernization efforts at an enterprise company called Highland Software, located in Westlake, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland. And we got about 500 developers. So I'm leading this whole effort.
Awesome. Well, you sent us a shortish, I guess, article that you've been working on. This 10 lessons learned in enterprise Angular development.
Is it too short?
No. There's plenty here to talk about, believe me. And I'm sure John has commentary on a lot of this stuff. But kind of to get us started, I'm curious, do you find that enterprise Angular development, is that different from non-enterprise, like smaller business, medium business, enterprise?
Yeah.
What does that adjective mean to you in this case?
My first job, I worked at a company with like 5 developers. And we just did whatever we wanted to do. If we felt like something was something we wanted to roll out, we did it. As soon as you get into this environment where you have over 100 developers, you have a lot of opinions. And it gets difficult to make decisions. And consistency is the number one thing, like making sure everyone is doing code the same way. That's what enterprise development means. It's huge, large scale stuff that you're trying to push. We deliver enterprise software to organizations, but enterprise to me in the software development sense, it's like, you got like hundreds of developers. You're trying to get them all in the same marching order at the same time. It's different than if you're a 10 developer shop.
I just always assumed, since I've never worked on a team that large, that it would be pretty much the same as a 5-person team, just kind of broken up into chunks. So like you've got, 100 teams of 5 developers kind of thing, or 10 teams of 5 developers. And they can all kind of move with the same swiftness and freedom. But I guess that would be madness.
Yeah, it's a little bit of madness.
Oh, you have got to get on one of these teams. It's like a little country. You get teams that want to follow patterns. You get teams that will ignore everything you say and be quiet, but do their own thing. You get teams that will loudly complain about everything you do, but still follow you. And then there'll be teams that will you get all sorts of different stuff. It's just like any city in the world, right? You get all shakes and bakes. And when you get a team that large, it's actually a lot of fun.
I don't know if it's fun.
Can I take it?
John, come work here. I don't know if it's fun. Edit that, please.
And Chaz no longer has a job.
Yes. It's difficult.
I can't even imagine, honestly. I mean, I've been on teams of, maybe up to 10, and it gets hard to coordinate things at that point. 20, I'm like, okay, if everybody kind of you get most everybody rowing in the same direction, maybe. But much more than that, I really can't visualize what that's like. Working on products like Facebook or, some of these other things where there's so many pieces that all work together to do something. Yeah, it just sounds crazy to me but I mean, people build these systems, right? AWS is a gigantic software system and they all make it work somehow. I don't know.
Well, I think there's different extremes, right? Like when I worked at Disney, there were some teams that we had to build some of the websites that were just huge and disparate. the reason it worked is because we were able to segregate out pieces of it so different teams could work on it. But it was still hard to coordinate. But in the same sense, when I hear enterprise, I also feel like I heard a new term the other day. Enterprise is tough because we kind of feel like we get these large things in our head. I think maybe a better way to describe it is just a business that is established.
Yeah.
Right. It's not startups. It's not that kind of thing. It's not a one-man shop or a one-person shop, to be more correct. It's an established business as opposed to emerging. And it could be a 3-person development team could be building enterprise stuff too.
Sure. I think but there's history involved. Like I think that's what you're aiming at. Like you have a legacy of what you're dealing with is not just the new developer out of college, right? You're dealing with people that have been in the industry for 25 years that have learned it. You know, they've been through this. They have their lessons. They have their ways of doing things, and sometimes those are difficult to break down, like the new ways to do things and the way where the web's going and where the industry is going, and everyone wants to break down the monolith. You need to break down yourself in order to actually build yourself back up to make yourself a successful developer in this new world.
Yeah. So maybe we should start with your questions here. Your lessons learned in enterprise Angular development. The first one you mentioned is don't make bonehead mistakes. Want to explain that one?
Well, it comes down to the best of web developers that we have at this company. So the company has traditionally been C++, C# developers. And I thought that the web developer teams that we did have would be the best Angular developers. Like out of the gate, like, guys, come on, you did JavaScript, you've done the prototypal inheritance, you guys are masters of that art. Here's this new framework called Angular. Let's use this. Let's leverage that. And what I found was that the web developers tend to just use their old tricks of the trade. One instance of this that popped up was, and this was actually given to me, this tip was given to me by Ed Morales of Teradata, and I didn't believe it at the time. He told me, oh yeah, I asked him on like Gitter, I said, hey man, give me some tips. Like what am I out for? Like as I'm trying to transform this team. And he said, watch out for the web developers. C++ guys, they'll go to the documentation for Angular. The web guys, they just do it the way they know how to do it. So what actually happened was I had a developer team just using document.location to navigate their Angular app instead of using the router, like router links. And I was just like blown away. That's when I was like, oh my God, he's completely right. So
I've written some really nice Rails looking code in Angular, Vue, and React. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Help me explain, just make sure, or explain this again. You're saying one guy or one person used router link and one person used document location to...
No. So the team, they were so familiar with just using JavaScript, using document.location to route the application. So instead of inside their component, they actually had button clicks that would invoke document location is equal to, and the new route that they wanted to go to. So they were mixing concepts that were from, pure JavaScript era with Angular. No.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get you to explain, Chaz, is which one are you saying is the boneheaded one? Which one is not the way you would recommend?
Don't use document location. Like use the framework, embrace the framework. That's the lesson learned here.
I think things like that are fine if it's just in a raw JavaScript app, but if you're using like you said, if you've dedicated yourself to using a framework and then you're kind of ignoring it most of the time or half the time, I don't know. It seems counterintuitive.
Well, let me play. I mean, I'm not disagreeing, but let me play devil's advocate. So let's say I come from pure JavaScript world and say, well, I want to learn JavaScript. Those skills are transferable anywhere, right?
Sure.
Angular skills are an Angular thing. And one of the knocks Angular developers get sometimes, or React or Vue or whatever, is that we're doing things in a Angular way, but not in a web way, right? So to be clear, router link is a abstraction. We use framework over document location doing other things. So my argument back could be to you, well, I want to use the JavaScript way. What's wrong with that? Is something going to happen, or why can't I?
Oh, wow. Good question.
What do you say in those kind of situations,
I guess honestly, John, I don't know how to answer that. There's a certain, it's almost like saying like, don't use query selector. I mean, that's where it boils down to. Like you're in this Angular framework. You need to do it the Angular way. Is
that like being in a Mexican restaurant and then ordering Italian? Is that kind of the analogy? Right?
I guess so.
Order Mexican.
Or does it have more to do with all of your friends are ordering Mexican and it makes you guys look bad if one of you orders Italian? Is it because everyone's supposed to be writing it the same way?
I don't. There's so much, like John said, there's some abstractions that Angular has that benefit the framework. And that consistency that you're getting because of the framework that exists is important. Like, sure, you can use all these native function calls to get things done and get your job accomplished and move on to the next issue. But what it boils down to is the next person that's out of school that learned Angular now has to learn. I'm trying to keep the nativeness to a minimum. I mean, and that's what Angular really tries to do is they put these abstractions over in place because they're trying to prevent you from doing bad things.
Yeah, I think this is, and to be clear, I'm not criticizing what's happening here. I'm just trying to look at the other perspective of it. I think the problem I sometimes struggle with too is when I see an abstraction, whether it's Angular, Vue, React, or whatever, I think a lot of people look at it and go, wow, that's cool. Angular does it this way. But if you know what's happening under the covers, my next thought is there an added advantage to using this way in Angular versus the traditional web way? And a better example might be not better, but maybe a closer example might be instead of router link, router.navigate to is probably closer to document.location, right? Because if you're going to do document location, you're writing it in code. So router link's in the template, but navigate to is in the code.
Right.
Is there a reason that navigate to exists as opposed to just writing document location? That's maybe where you get to, okay, let's go look at the docs and see that thing doing.
That boils down to the whole universal, right? It boils down to doing server-side rendering and that type of stuff. You know, we're talking about things that I don't really want to get into explaining why.
If there's value in it, I think there's, that's the good thing. This is the kind of conversation I have a lot with folks where they're like, why should I learn this Angular way when I can do X, Y, Z? And if the answer is there is value to this abstraction, I think then that's great. But honestly, I like when people ask these questions because it means they're thinking. And they're challenging the assumptions as opposed to just saying, oh, it's in the documentation, I've got to do it this way just because somebody wrote a style guide that said do it this way.
Well, yeah. Well, and just to be clear, they didn't refer to the documentation in this case. We had an app built using document location to route.
Like a jQuery app?
That's what that's what you have. You have a team that's comfortable with jQuery, so they're very, that's what's occurring. You're using these old methodologies, practices in your applications. Yep.
I think you got a great point too, Alyssa. You mentioned, maybe getting people on the same page, doing it the same way. I think there's value in that too.
I'm trying to think of why it's bad. Like, okay, other than legibility, like if you have new people join the team and half your code is written a different way, I feel like it makes it harder for those new people to learn the code. But other than that, I don't really know. We always do stress consistency, right, between developers and try to have the same patterns, but I don't know why.
It's always good to ask why. I'll tell you, one of the best things I ever learned is ask why and keep asking why. Don't, even your own things that you've done for years. And as long as you do it in a respectful way, it's a good conversation and good things come of it. And
every time I hear that, there's a bunch of books about that sort of methodology, John. I just always wonder why. Why should I be asking why?
Joe, why do you wonder why you should ask why, though?
That's a good question. I never thought about that.
Joe, why have you never thought about it?
Oh, gosh. So you were saying you got like this very specific example, Chaz, here, right? They're doing things this way, and it's a very specific, they're web developers. They already know a way to do something. They learn this new tool, technique, kit, whatever. They're trying to do the new thing in the old way. Like, what is the point of that? This is about just as much about really learning as it is about learning something new as it is about anything else. Whether or not you're a web developer going to Angular, or even if a C# developer going to Angular, because even though the C# developer is going to go to the documentation, right? Like, I remember when I went to C#, I did so many things wrong. When I was trying to do it VB and ASP and FoxPro way when I started C#. And then when I went to the web, I guess maybe it was a little bit different because JavaScript was so different from anything I was used to that I questioned everything. But you got these ways you know how to do things and you can somehow relate them. And that's one of the blessings and drawbacks of being a very experienced developer or having experience as a developer is you learn things to relate them to, but sometimes you don't learn to do it the idiomatic or proper way because you make assumptions that just aren't correct. So this isn't specific to enterprise, though, right?
Well, the lesson is your seasoned web developers are going to make Angular mistakes. What I'm saying is don't just assume that your web developer is going to take Angular and use all the patterns that are coming from the tour heroes or anything the right way. Like they're going to make mistakes,
because you're probably safe that most people would assume, oh, if I've got a .NET developer heading over to Angular or a Java developer or whatever, a Rails developer, that they are not going to do it the wrong way. But
they won't, because why? They reference the documentation. See, they will go back to the websites. They will do a Google search. See,
right.
they don't know.
They know better, right?
Right. But if you have a web developer though, that's like, well, I know how to change the URL of the window. Come on, I know this, or I know how to query for that element. I know how to do that. They'll just do it. They'll do it in the way that they won't even go to Angular.io. They won't do that. They'll just do it the way they know how to do it. That's the lesson. Even though you think you can just hand Angular to a web team that's been working with the web for 10 years, keep a pulse on them. Make sure, review their code every now and then. Make sure that they are actually embracing the Angular concepts. So
isn't this though extractable into a more generic piece of advice, being if you know something and you're learning something that's kind of similar, but you need to not make nearly as many assumptions about how much you know, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're an Angular developer and you're going to go to React, that's probably not a situation where you're going to want to assume that you know what's going on, right? Yep. You need to research stuff and learn the React way.
Yeah, I think it was just a lesson learned for myself because I just assumed that good web developers would do good things.
Utilizing Vue components. What's that all about?
Yeah, so that's a huge one. Those are components that I think of them as like smart components that you actually route your router with. If you're building an application right now and you're just routing to components and these components just sit inside some root folder called components, you're setting yourself up for an organization like, how do I word this? It's going to be difficult for someone to track down what components are used for what URLs. And that's what this is all about. Like create a folder inside your project called views. And inside there, you should be putting one smart component, one component called like home, about. That's what I'm talking about. These main components that you're using to drive your actual URLs. And those components should talk to NGXS and all those. It's a smart component. It's talking to all those data source frameworks to pull in your data, to read from the router, and basically bootstrap that view. Sorry, that's a terrible description of what I'm trying to talk about here.
So yeah, but let me see if I can restate it. So essentially, they're your top level pages or views that you route to, and so when you change your path or whatever, you tell the router to go somewhere. This is what it pulls in and loads.
Exactly. Yep. And so what developers typically do right out of the tour heroes is they'll just build a folder and they'll just start slamming component after component until the folder becomes 20 components. And you got them all in one folder. And you just look at someone's application and go, well, what is actually used for presentational, like viewing on a certain link or something? And it gets just hard to look at code and figure out how it's actually organized. So what I'm proposing here, and I'm not the only one, there's other people that this isn't my own unique idea, but I'm definitely pushing it here, is make view components. So go as far as, instead of using .component, do .view, go into your tslint file and modify it to accept components with the suffix, the suffix of view. So add the view suffix as being an allowed suffix. So typically out of the box with CLI, you get just component. Go in there, add view, and then create a folder just for views. And then each folder that you make inside of the views are actually the routes of your application, like about, home, log out, log in. Those should all be view components.
I've seen a couple of different technologies do something like this. I like the idea definitely of breaking this down into, you've got components that get routed to, in this case, calling them view components. And as Charles also pointed out, routable components.
Yep.
Vue does this as well. They actually have a folder in the most of their default strategies where you'll have a folder called views and a folder called components out of the box. They're both components, but the ones in views can be things that you route to, while the components one are more like pieces that go into those views. They're not necessarily routed to.
Yep.
I like that concept. The organization is where it breaks down for me a little. I'm curious what you think. Mm-hmm. So one of the reasons I like having everything in one folder place is if I'm working on customer and it's got one routable view, maybe three, but maybe say customer list, customer edit, customer review, picking anything.
Sure.
There are three view components, as you say. And then inside of each component, there could be 7 to 10 subcomponents that show up in each one. Some of them appear in more than one of those views. Some of them only appear in one. If I put those 7 to 10 components in another folder somewhere else, and I put the view ones in a folder mixed up with all the other view components, am I not jumping back and forth a lot? Or how do you organize that so you're not playing with your tree view in your editor? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let me just get this right. So you're talking about components that are being used by multiple views in this case.
It could be, or they could be components that are used by one view each. Would you still separate them, or would you put them in the same folder? I'm trying to get an idea of how you organize these things.
Yeah. So each view will then contain its own folder called components, and you put your components that are only used within the view within that folder of components. So instead of using this shared component concept where you have a global components folder, isolate your views with your components, and as those components are actually, if they're used in more than one view, that's where it's going into my next lesson, bubble your components up. So you put your components as close as possible to the views that actually utilize them. And as a second view then needs that component, that's when you would say, okay, we have two views. The About page and the Home page both utilize this navigation component. Let's bubble that up another level. Let's put it into a shared components folder that's outside of the views folder that's used in multiple areas. So that's where you get into a bubbling effect.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. And give my personal opinion on it. I don't think it matters that much to me as long as the entire team does it the same way. I know Joe has some specific opinions on organization. How do you feel about all this stuff, Joe?
Oh, my organization opinions. We need Ward here to talk about organization opinions.
I know. You want to fight, you got to get Ward and you together, right?
Yeah, his Jedi components and his Sith components. It's funny because when I get in and I build applications, and I've been playing a lot with Vue lately, but I have played a bit with Angular as well. I tend to like to group things together by concern. So if they're general layout components, then I'll put them in a layouts folder or layout folder, or maybe a shared folder. As far as like Vue components, I kind of like that because they're kind of all at the same level. But I would really actually tend to put like components that belong to the home page in a home folder, including the home component, which is the Vue component. And then similar with the About and on and on and on, right? So if I have a customer's master top level view, then I'll put that into its own folder, or maybe leave that at the top level and have all my, what you call Vue components up there. And then anything that belongs to that will go into a customer's folder. And then, anything that's shared will go into, something that describes what the concern is that they belong to.
So like every Rails app ever built.
It is. It's a very Rails way to think. Well, actually, no. Rails separates concerns by concern. So it's model and view and controller.
Wait, right. Did you say it separates concerns by concern?
He did.
Yes, I did.
Are you concerned
by layer? It does it by layer.
Did you ask
the layer of the
why, though? All right, Rails separates concerns by layers.
Yes, and that it actually, I don't like that as much. I like putting all the stuff that's going to change together.
I agree. My general feeling is whatever I'm working on or my team's working on, I want us to have the least amount of friction when we're developing that thing as possible. What the exact organization is, I don't think is truly important. I think there's many that work well. To me, an example of what doesn't work well, something you hit on, Charles, is have a folder for components, have a folder for filters, have a folder for services. That's not how I think of in my app. I think of I'm building a customer screen or I'm building a login screen, Yeah,
and just to pile on here a little bit, the first few things that we've talked about, what we're really talking about is the mental shortcuts that we take.
Yep.
And as you get a larger and larger group of people working on an application, you want more and more of them taking the same mental shortcuts. And that's why you're looking for consistency, which is something that Alyssa mentioned. And so when we're talking about, going back like document.location and things like that, that level of consistency basically allows us to take those mental shortcuts. And so if you can stick close to something that is more adoptable by the community, or if there are mental shortcuts that the framework designers are intending you or planning on you taking, then doing it the framework way can pay off that way. And as you bring new people in, they're going to be taking some of those mental shortcuts anyway if they've been using the framework.
Well, I even saw it with upgrading. So our team would kind of have an argument about which way to do it. And if we did stick with the Angular recommended way, it did make, because I think this was actually before NG2. And so it made upgrading for our team easier if we did decide to go with the Angular way. And so sometimes there's, architectural decisions that you don't see, like, why would we do it this way? And then a month later, they release something and you're like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot more stable now. So
I think it's important to document these things. I remember when I was working with one of the large teams way, way, way back, we used to we were using a plugin that would automatically embed the Angular 1.5 templates into the bundle. So combine the HTML in with the JavaScript, basically. So you have two different HTTP calls. I think it was called ng template at the time. A lot of people still use this thing. And with this, if I remember correctly, you had to have a comment above your controller at the time or component where it said, okay, use this plugin, basically. So the plugin would look for that comment so it knew where to kind of put these things, or to do injectables, for example. ng inject was another one. You could have a comment for it to do it.
Wow. That sounds super breakable.
Yeah, it was interesting, and
comment-driven development.
But then once you did it and a month passes by, new people join the team, they're like, why the hell are we putting this comment on top of all these controllers? And it's something that we made a mistake on. I remember early on doing this. It was ng inject, by the way, for the injectables. And it was a super valuable thing to do, but without telling people why, that was a big mistake I made at the time. So it was something I needed to document. It was actually one of the first times I worked. Did
people start taking out your comments?
Yes. And if you did that and you bundled it in production, it wasn't working right.
But once you know about it and you see it, then your brain just automatically makes the connections for you on that.
Yeah. And that was a mistake I made. I had the curse of knowledge. I knew what it did, but there were new people in the team who had no idea. Yeah.
And so as much as you can get everybody within the same context, you know what, where is this? Oh, it's here. No, it's here. And that's what we're talking about with the code organization and things like that.
Need to create a complex enterprise Angular application? Angular Bootcamp is an intensive 3-day workshop class to learn the basics of Angular through sophisticated techniques for real-world applications. We target Angular 6 and the recent versions, with much of the curriculum is suitable back to Angular 2. Or go beyond the 3-day class with a consultation or project launch with Oasis Digital, the team behind Angular Bootcamp. We can assist your team or launch your project with advanced Angular topics including scalability, data flow, state management, full stack product design, and more. Contact us for a private class at your location or buy a ticket for public classes in various cities around the U.S. and occasionally in Europe. Online live instructor training is also available at angularbootcamp.com.
And you're talking about number 4 on your list is packaging only if you're sharing. We all like to share. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I struggle with this a lot. Like as soon as teams found out that they could use ng packager or use the CLI, sorry, it's actually now built in the CLI, but as soon as they found out that they could package that up in a nice, tidy way and push that out and put it as an NPM package in our internal ProGit, I had multiple teams starting to do that. And they did not understand the consequences of doing that. I think that packaging a library comes with responsibility. And a lot of teams just are very quick to say, well, great, we want to make this shareable. Let's make it shareable, even though I don't have an actual customer that wants this. So they will do that. So in the example I have is I have a team that is actually building an application, and then they have just one component built by a team of 2 developers. And there is not a second application. It's just one application. And this other team of 2 developers decided, hey, we're going to package this and we're going to ship it independently in its own end. We're not going to even develop it within your own repository, even though there's just one application that's using this thing. And when I asked them, like, guys, like if you just build this alongside their project, they're not going to have to NPM link it. They're not going to have to go through all these hoops just to get the latest version. Why don't you just develop it? Like use the projects folder inside Angular CLI. You can make a library folder in there. It's really easy. Just go ahead and make your own library folder and work out of that. And it would be ambient to them that you were even doing this. They didn't want to hear anything about that. They wanted to just ship their own component and publish it themselves. So what I'm telling teams to do is avoid packaging. Avoid packaging as long as you can, because you're going to have teams that are going to want to, for whatever reason, they're going to want to ship their own stuff, even though there's only one application that's actually using it. as soon as you have two applications that actually need this component and they're completely different repositories, that's when it makes sense. Just don't do it till you need it. Don't package your solution unless two applications need it.
Well, one thing that I see here is that if I build something into my application, I know what the use case is. I know what the usage is. I know how all that goes.
Exactly.
If I have something that is useful to another application, I don't necessarily completely understand what the use case is or the expected usage is over there. And so what I may wind up doing is I may package it up in such a way early that makes it hard for them to use in their particular use case, even though it is applicable.
Yep.
And so if I wait and see, okay, now team B needs what team A created, now we can have a conversation about what the API should look like, what the packaging and module structure should be. And then we can turn around and say, okay, well, we're going to extract this and we're going to pull the parts that make sense for you. And we're going to put it together in a way that you can use it.
Exactly.
It's really interesting that some of your team was doing this preemptively. Did they tell you why? Like, do they just...
They
is that
knew,
their passion?
Yeah, this is this is enterprise. This is where enterprise comes in. So traditionally, like if I built something in an ASP.NET web page and it was some type of component, let's just say I have a navigation panel or something like that I'm going to ship in my ASP.NET web page. They felt the pain of how difficult that is to actually refactor and make into an ASP.NET control. And I know that we don't have a lot of people here with .NET backend experience like that. That's like old school .NET, but that was not something easy to do because there was no template engine. You had to do everything within C#. So they felt the pain of trying to refactor something that was once a Vue like HTML template and try to make that shareable for the rest of the organization. And what that ended up having to do is they had to take and write that component almost completely in C#. And so the refactoring process was not just, oh, let's just take this little bit of code and bubble it up a level. No, it was like we have to go in, refactor it, figure out what JavaScript does this actually use inside the page. Because remember, just have a script.js, right, on the page. Functions on the window. Let's just have fun. So that was their way of thinking. So refactoring something like that is extremely difficult.
So it was basically fear of refactoring.
Yes.
And so they're like, thinking of the biggest picture they could possibly imagine this code being and trying to write it from there.
Yeah. How do I like they're stuck in the way of thinking like, oh my God, we did that in the past and it took months. And really with Angular, it makes it super easy. Everything's modular, all the components, as long as you organize your code right, it's easy to lift your components from your own solution or your project into a library. Makes it really portable. And yeah, trying to get that across to new teams just coming on to Angular, they don't see that. They're already like, let's just build libraries. So
no, that
a bit of
totally
training.
Makes sense. And like from their side of it, I see now why they did it, but I also see why it's not the best to start off doing. So I wanted to ask you, because we're running out of time, about for sure number 5. Teams should develop a fun application. What does that mean?
Yeah. I've just seen a lot of people go and build applications. Hey, you're going to build an Angular application. Go for it. They take that as, let's rewrite this thing that's been built for 10 years and do it in Angular. And what ends up happening is the team just trips over themselves, actually. So what I'm saying you should do here is have the team just build something that maybe is useful as a tool for the team or a fun project. Just build something that gets the team into Angular outside the Tour Heroes. Have everyone do the Tour Heroes. Everyone do your own learning on your own, Pluralsight, John Papa's course. Let's do it. And then after everyone's kind of done that, let's jump back in. Let's build a app that's going to be throwaway, but we're just going to do it for fun. And we're going to learn as a team how to work in Angular. And what you'll see is the team will start to figure out like, oh, what's this router link? Oh, I didn't know you could reference variables like that. Oh, I didn't know you could use a view child. Like you're going to get some like initial, like the stirring the pot of ideas and how to solve problems occurring, and do that first. Like have a week or two of just that happening before you jump into let's rebuild this thing we did for 10 years. Because what you're going to get is people just tripping up over themselves.
So have you actually done that where you had your team do a fun application?
Actually, my team not specifically, but this is what I recommend for all new teams that come on board. any new team members that join our team, they actually spend a week or two doing this on their own. They basically we tell them, go do the tour of heroes. And after tour of heroes, I want you just to experiment. And then I want you to make pull requests and include everyone on this process. So this is a very, that's where you're going to get your initial feedback. So we're trying to break those bad habits early through these tiny projects that they've actually built.
That's a really neat idea. So you don't spend any more than a couple of weeks, you said?
Yeah. And I don't want them to just jump right into the code base, because now that's just another hurdle for them to figure out, okay, well, what did this other developer do before me? I'd want them just to get into the code base on their own, figure out how to use components, how do you just work in this ecosystem, and how do I work with the team? And that's just build a starter app.
Very cool.
Fun projects.
So number 6 makes me think that research is bad. You have a topic to break out of the research loop.
Yeah, because there's just there's a lot. If you take a brand new developer and said, build this app and ship it to production in 6 months, and it needs to have language translations, it needs to have all the bells and whistles, right? They're going to be spinning their wheels trying to figure out how to do all these things the right way. And really what you should be doing is just build an application. So here, this is my own experience. We started out looking at how do we build a modern application with web, right? How do we do that? How do we do translations? How do we right to left? There's so many things that we need to do in order to ship an enterprise product that government can use, that healthcare can use. It's not easy. And if you get caught up in all of those problems that you need to solve early on and just keep researching, you're never going to get anything out. So what I'm basically advocating here is figure out your MVP, what you need, your minimum viable product, figure out what that is, and just build it with your team. Whatever it is, go and build it, and then get feedback on it. It's just saying, do agile things.
I just feel like it could be hard to find the balance between, because earlier in the show, we talked about how you basically should be doing research, at least on the language or the framework side, so that you're not just, because for instance, I feel like your developers were jumping in, using document or using the JavaScript way of it. And that was just the fastest way to get going. But at the same time, you have to lean into research a bit. So it's the balance, right? Of when do we stop researching? Or
it's a difference between, let me just clarify. That's the difference between understanding how Angular works and the methods and the toolkits and the utilities that are available already for you out of the box, and then trying to figure out how to do translations or picking a state store. It gets beyond just Angular at that point. There's so many things that you can pull into your application, and so many little prototypes that you could do. Let's try NGX or NGX translate. Let's try just using the regular translation stuff. Let's try NGRX. Let's try NGXS. You could just get into this whole research loop of trying to figure stuff out for the organization, and you should just buckle down and just build something to prove that you can build something that's modern, that is accessible, that is mobile first, all these things that we want to build in our applications to make them rich. You can do it, and you don't have to know everything up front. It's okay to let a couple things slip. You don't need to know everything. So my lesson learned here is 25 years, this company that I'm working at has been developing, software. And they're trying to pour all of those lessons learned into this modern framework, right? Don't do it that way. We knew 10 years ago that was the wrong way to do it. Don't worry about that stuff. Just build something now. And so this is really, it's not really a lesson for the 5-person team. This is a lesson for the teams that are really trying to break down the monolith, 400 developers that are just trying to get the ball rolling. Just build something. Don't get caught up in that continual churn that you're going to be faced, because you're going to have developers that are seasoned, that have been here for 20, 15 years, that are going to say, well, how are you going to do X? And you look at X and you go, I have no idea. And I don't even think Angular has you're like, oh my God, that didn't even occur to me. Don't sweat it. That might sound bad, but no, just build it. Just build agile. Keep building upon what you have.
Yeah, I think a common theme between a couple of these is just having this mindset of, your MVP versus what thinking way too far down the line, or I don't know, really blowing things out of proportion way too early when you haven't even started yet. So
exactly. Yep. That is pretty much the common theme here. And just to like build on that, like I also talk about like resisting to build the utility libraries and stuff. You want to be our team right now. We have about 2 years of Angular experience, and if I get a pull request from a developer that's trying to make a new utility class or something, it might make unit testing really simple. It might look great. Like I look at the code and I'm like, you've eliminated so many lines in the code because you've added this utility class. Great. But don't build utility classes. The teams are going to be looking at your code. And as soon as you start putting things in there that are your own homebrew things that they can't find through Google, you're just adding another level for them to go, what? And they'll stop reading your code because of that.
Good point.
Yep. I'm going to push us toward picks because I know that some of the panelists have a hard stop coming up. But yeah, before we do that, Chaz, where do people find you online, assuming you blog or on Twitter, GitHub, that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me at C Gatian on Twitter, and that's basically my main handle.
Awesome. This episode is brought to you by TripleByte. Applying to programming jobs sucks. You have to put the right keywords in your resume. You spend hours and hours on the phone screens and take-home projects, and that's assuming the company even responds to your application. Well, if you're a software engineer, TripleByte can help. They work with over 400 top tech companies, from big names like Dropbox and Adobe to exciting startups. You do one brief online interview with them, and if you do well, you go straight to final interviews with the company on their platform. It's like the Common App for software developers. TripleByte does not look at your resume or where you went to school. All they care about is if you can code. I've helped dozens of software developers with various credentials get jobs, and this looks like a terrific way for you to get in and get interviewed and get a job without a lot of the hassle and overhead. You can go check them out at triplebyte.com/Angular. That's triplebyte.com, byte as in 8 bits. As a special offer for listeners of this show, if you take a job through TripleByte, they'll offer you a $1,000 signing bonus. All right, well, let's go ahead and do some picks. John, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, my pick is kind of a generic one. I have been struggling for years with where to write. I like to write. And I've moved my blog like 5 or 6 times. At one point, I even tried Ruby. It'll make you happy, Chuck.
Yay! Go check out Ruby Rogues if you're Ruby.
I quickly ran away from it, sorry. But what I was really looking for is where can I blog that I don't have to worry about setting up my own blog? And I ended up on Ghost, which I have hosted now, a Ghost Pro Online. And it works. It's at johnpapa.net. But lately, I've been really pushing for, maybe I should be blogging on Medium. A lot of people go to Medium, and they're doing a lot of stuff there. And so my pick is Medium itself. While it isn't a perfect platform, what's really nice, if you're looking for a place to write and it's no muss, no fuss, Medium is a great place. I've been enjoying writing there lately. And what I like about it is if you are new to writing, it's a great place for you to write, and it's already got a community. So people searching for content that you might be writing, so if someone searches for enterprise development with Angular, that would get a lot of hits right there. So I'm kind of liking Medium lately. It's not all perfect. There are some issues with it, but it's a great entry-level way to do some writing, and I may end up switching a lot of my stuff there.
Nice. Alyssa, what are your picks?
So I don't have very good picks. I am super pumped, though. Today is me and my husband's 8th anniversary. So although
congrats,
I had the year wrong, I told everyone it was our 9th, and he was like, babe, do the math. So I don't know. Years and dates don't really mean much to me anymore. I'm like, how old am I? So it's kind of gotten to that point in life where, but yeah, I'm super pumped about that. And also we got our AT fixed. So we have, Joe, you should like this, a very large blow up Christmas AT in our front yard.
Oh, I love it.
And he is the most festive that we get in this household. So his fan was broken, and so my husband spent about 4 hours rewiring him. And I was like, yay, hardware. So yes, 2 festive picks for me today, but nothing technical. And thank you so much again for coming on the show. I just wanted to give you a thank you before we ended it, because this was a really fun one.
All right, Joe, what are your picks?
All right, so I'm going to pick 2 board games today. I've been playing some board games lately, having some fun time. So the first one is called Quacks of Quedlinburg, which is as awesome as it sounds. It's literally about being a quack doctor.
Like are you saying quack like the duck noise?
No, quack like a doctor, like a bad doctor.
Yeah.
Quack. Yeah, it's called Quacks of Quedlinburg is the name of the game. It's really cool.
Joe, why?
So I really like that game. That one was a lot of fun. You basically are a quack trying to mix a potion and impress a bunch of townspeople, I guess. It's pretty fun. Really cool mechanics. And the other one I played that was really fun is called Spell Smashers. And Spell Smashers is actually like a spelling game, which not everybody loves spelling games, but I really like spelling games. You're trying to spell words and you have these potions, and then you use, with the words that you spell, you defeat monsters, and it's really fun. So, Spell Smashers. Those are my 2 picks.
Love it.
Nice. I'm going to jump in with a few picks. And yeah, I'm not picking games, and I'm not picking code stuff, and I'm not picking dates out of my life. I decided that I am going to run a marathon in 2019. My friend John Sonmez.
Oh my goodness. Yay. Chuck, that's so exciting.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it for a while. And the problem that I had was that, I would basically gear up and I'd go run a 10K or something. And then my running would just fall off. And, I'd get burned out or bored or whatever with it, or I just wouldn't know what to do next. Anyway, so I was talking about it because John, my friend John, has run a number of marathons. I was like, yeah, I keep thinking I want to run a marathon. He's like, just do it. So I did, but then I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So he recommended to me a running coach. And so I went and signed up. The company that I went with that provides running coaches is called McCurdy Trained. That's MCKIRDY trained.com. I've recommended this on a few shows, and I know that they're already somewhat overloaded. So I apologize if it takes them a little longer than normal to get back to you. Anyway, they've been terrific. Been giving me workouts, helped me, figure out some stuff with gear. One piece of gear, and I'm also picking that is the Garmin Forerunner 235 watch. I needed something that would prompt me to run or walk on an interval, because that's the kind of training I'm doing at the moment, because I'm in terrible shape, right? Run a little, walk a little. And my Fitbit wouldn't do it. So anyway, the Garmin watch does. I'm pretty happy with it. So I picked that up as well. I've had a few people ask me what marathon I plan to run, and I'm planning to run the St. George Marathon. That's going to be in October, St. George, Utah. So if you want to sign up, I'm happy to meet people down there. I don't know how likely that is, but that's fine. And yeah.
That's awesome, though. I'm really proud of you. That's something that I am also, it's on my check, bucket list. So you do it. I'm so pumped. How long does it take to run a marathon on average?
About 5 minutes.
Thank you, John. We know you're in shape.
I don't know. It depends on how many episodes of Stranger Things you watch. I mean, 10 is 10 hours. Right?
Are there any wormholes involved in space and time during this running of the marathon? Because I
don't know. I calculated it and I was like, is it going to take me 7 hours at this pace to run a marathon? Is it really a 7-hour thing, or am I doing math wrong?
So my understanding is that they generally expect it to take you somewhere in the ballpark of 4 hours, 5 hours.
Okay, so if you're at 7, you're doing something very wrong.
I really have no idea. No idea whatsoever. So
that's awesome. Cool to hear that the Garmin watch is helping you. When I was running, I wanted an app that would basically turn off my music if I got below a certain rhythm.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Well, it'd be super annoying. You'd be like, oh, fine, I'll speed up, whatever.
Yeah.
But very cool.
Yeah. So anyway, I picked St. George because my dad ran it when I was a kid. Kind of a way for me to connect with him since we lost him this year. But yeah, I'm pumped. It's going to be fun. So this time next year, I'm going to be almost as ripped as John.
Well, good luck, Charles. Really, I think it's great, and you should be proud of yourself for taking this on.
Oh, thanks. Chaz, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, definitely. Anyone out there building schematics, the CDK actually has a utility class for schematics. So it adds a couple, if you pull in Angular I'm forgetting now the package name, but if you pull in the CDK, basically there's utility classes there to help you build schematics. I don't think they've ever written a blog post about it, but you'll find stuff to add packages to your projects from just good stuff there if you're actually building your own homebrew schematics. GraphQLEditor.com, really cool website to quickly build a GraphQL schema. We're kind of getting into the GraphQL thing, and that's a really cool tool. I hope that they keep working on that. And Thomas Burleson just had a blog post on Angular in depth on ghosting elements, and I think that's a really interesting post. So definitely check that out.
We might have to get him back on. And yeah, we did an episode of Angular schematics last week with Brian and Kevin. So if you are interested in schematics, definitely give that one a listen. All right, folks. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you for coming, Chaz.
Yeah, thank you guys.
A lot of fun. And this is really interesting just to talk about the approach to large organizations building large Angular apps.
It's an adventure.
An adventure in Angular, no less.
It definitely is.
Oh, wow. You brought it full circle there.
I did. I'm sorry. I'm good at the dad jokes. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, folks, and we'll be back next week. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.